Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today we have a big show. We are going to start off by talking a little bit about the NBA. Jason Tatum has been in MVP conversations, but is he a top 5 player in the league? We're going to break down the top 10 I've done, and some honorable mentions as well. In the second segment, we are going to move into more NFL draft coverage, ranking the NFL ranking the QBs that are prospects in this draft. Talking a little bit about what I think about these guys and what I think their future in the NFL and their draft positions might look like. Coming around in our third segment, we are going to move into some fighting news. Jake Paul has announced that he's taking on Mike Tyson. We're going to break that down a little bit, talk about Jake Paul's career as a boxer a little bit, and why Mike Tyson might be doing this. And then we're going to finish off our show strong with the NHL trade deadline recap. We've done a little bit of NHL coverage with some of the smaller trades, but the trade deadline ended 2 hours ago. So we know exactly where everybody is ending up. We know what every trade is. We're going to go over the big ones and their effects on the rest of the season in the NHL. But before we get too far into it, remember that if you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen there for me, you, and everyone else to see. We'll have a little bit of a conversation about what you had to say. We appreciate everything that you do give. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I said, we are going to start our show off with a little bit of NBA talk. Is Jason Tatum a top 5 player in the NBA? I've compiled a list here of my top 10 players in the NBA, along with some honorable mentions that you could make arguments for. It's not an easy list to make. It's obviously very subjective, but we're gonna go through this list as best as I can, being objective, so you guys understand my reasoning here. And we'll start off with some honorable mentions here, all the way at the bottom. When I was making this list, what I did is I just went through every single team and picked guys that even had a shot of being in the top 10. Uh, so I have a list here of about 18 guys, I think. It goes all the way down to Devin Booker, who is the bottom of my list here. So honorable mentions for me: Devin Booker, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Edwards, and I have Jimmy Butler down there at 11. So those are my honorable mentions. The 11, 12, 10, 9, 8, that range, I feel like once you get past around 7, at least on my list, there were a little more. You can flip them. I don't really doesn't. It's a lot closer between them. So we're gonna start right there at number 10. In my opinion, the 10th best player in the league is going to be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He is an MVP candidate. He is really young. He's coming into his own game. He's leading the league in 30-point games. He's done it 44 times. He's averaging 31 points this season, and he's leading a super young Thunder team to potentially the number 1 seed in the West. He is an incredible talent. He is the engine that drives that team. He is what is keeping them afloat. They still have lots of talent around him. Chet Holmgren is there. They have a bunch of other guys that can hold their weight. But without Shea, that team is probably a play-in team, maybe maybe a 6 or 5 seed. He elevates them to a new level, and obviously he is battling for that MVP with Nikola Jokic. At number 9, I've got LeBron James. It was hard for me to take him out of my top 10. I know he's older, and there's a lot of guys, kind of like the changing of the guard. But having him at 9 feels like a fair spot for me. He is again 39, but if you look at what he's been doing all season, he's playing like he's still in his prime. Now, his prime obviously was a much higher level than this, but this, if you got 99% of NBA players to play like LeBron is playing this season and how he's been doing his entire career, this would probably still be considered their prime. So he is still in my top 10. At number 8, I've got the rookie Victor Wembanyama. Just watching him play is incredible. I know he's hurt right now, but when you watch him play, both on the offensive and the defensive ends, the game just looks so easy to him. Even when he's getting beat, he's just so long, so versatile. He does everything, so he makes everything look easy on the basketball court, and that's really tough to do when you're playing against the best players in the entire world. Uh, you know, it's incredible to watch him. He's only gonna get better, which is scary. For now, I have him at 8. He has jumped a lot. If you asked me in the beginning of the season, he wasn't there. He wasn't top 20, top 25. He wasn't quite there yet. But he has made huge improvements throughout this entire season. It's been crazy to see how fast he has adjusted to the NBA game. Uh, and he's doing stuff that we've never seen. He might average a 5 by 5 in a couple years, which is insane. The 5 by 5 is very rare. Uh, but he's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if a couple years down the road we're talking about him averaging a 5 by 5. And this is where it gets interesting. Like I said, I think at this point there's a little bit of separation between the rest of the group. At number 7, I have Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum, who has been an MVP candidate the whole season. He just gets these stretches where he's cold and he can't hit the broadside of a barn. Jason Tatum is not like when he's on, he's on. He is a top 10 player in the NBA, no doubt. But having him here at number 7, I don't think he's quite top 5. He doesn't have that clutch factor. He kind of fades away in a lot of moments, in a lot of playoff runs. Now, he has been able to take them to the finals, and there were a couple games in last year's playoffs where, for instance, I forget which round it was in, but the Celtics were losing, and he was having, quite honestly, an abysmal game. I don't think he had scored a single point until the fourth quarter when he went off. So it's not like he doesn't have that clutch gene. It's just that he has these spurts where he goes cold in some of the biggest moments. And to be a top 5 player, you can't really have that. And that's the separating factor for me between Jason Tatum and him being a top 5 player. And that's not to say that he isn't close. The beginning of the season, I don't think I would have had him there either, but you could make the argument, and you still can make the argument. But I don't quite think that he is a top 5 player in the league. And that Celtics team is really good. Sixth, I've got Kevin Durant. KD is a freak of nature. He's kind of like the guard version of Wembanyama or a Chet. He's kind of the preamble to them. He can shoot it better than almost anyone in the history of the game, and he is so big and so long. Uh, Kevin Durant is number 6 on the list for me, and here we enter into the top 5, which is really interesting. 4 of my top 5 are international players. At number 4, I've got Luka. The way he can score is what's keeping him up here. Luka is an elite scorer. He is the only guy, in my opinion, that has a shot, at least that's playing basketball currently, to challenge LeBron James for points. Now, I don't think he's going to do it, but I don't think there's anyone else in the NBA or around the world that can challenge him. He's the only one that has the ability to do it. So he is top 5 in the league. He's number 5 for me on this list. Getting into number 4, this is where I'm putting Steph Curry, the greatest shooter of all time. He is still having a phenomenal season. You can kind of tell he's starting to decline. He just hurt his ankle again. It's not it's concerning because he's had ankle issues before. He is missing. He's going to miss the next couple games, but he is still one of the best shooters in the entire world, and he's the best shooter of all time. He is number 4 on my list, and this is when we get into the big men. And at number 3, I've got Joel Embiid here. Joel Embiid is my third best player in the league. He's just a little too injury prone for me to put him above a guy like Giannis. Um, Joel Embiid, when he's on the court, is a difference maker. You see how much different the Sixers are with and without Joel Embiid. You see the huge difference in their game, the amount of space, the amount of gravity that he has on the court. Uh, he is the third best player, and that brings us to our top two. Which at number 2, I've got Giannis. He's got the nickname Greek Freak for a reason. He's a freak athlete. He again, like these a lot of these guys that are in the top 10 of this list are big, long and strong. They've got the ability to dominate you in the low post, and they're big enough and long enough that they can affect you on defense from insanely far away. Uh, Giannis is my second best player in the league. When obviously he is there behind Nikola Jokic, the MVP frontrunner, the uh, the guy that's won MVP 2 out of the last 3 years, been an MVP finalist 3 years in a row, about to make it 4 years in a row. Uh, a guy that has a guy that is coming off winning an NBA championship, a guy that is going to average a triple double sometime in his career, maybe this season. He's really close again. Uh, Nikola Jokic, who doesn't really care about basketball, and that's the scary part. We've talked a little bit about him before on this program. It's scary to think how good he could be if he tried. Uh, and I'll leave it at that. Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world. I'll run through my top 10 real quick before we reach the end of this segment. Uh, Jokic 1, Giannis 2, Embiid 3, Curry 4, Luka Doncic 5, Kevin Durant at 6, Jason Tatum at 7, Wemby at 8, LeBron at 9, and Shea at 10. Let me know what you guys think of this list. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But yeah, going into our next segment, we are going to transition out of the NBA, talk about the NFL a little bit, go back to some draft coverage, quarterback prospect rankings. It's a big ranking show today. I'm going to break down some of the quarterbacks. I've got them separated into 4 tiers. So we've got 4 tiers of players. We're going to break down where I think these guys are going to go in the draft just by round. We're not going to get too specific. But yeah, stick around. Thank you for tuning in to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We will be right back. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't need shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in, we just finished a segment going over my personal top 10 players in the NBA, talking a little bit about if Jason Tatum is in the top 5. Spoilers, he is not. In this segment, we are going to continue to do some rankings, this time talking about the NFL draft prospects for quarterbacks. I have 7 quarterbacks here listed. Not necessarily the top 7, but they are my top 7. Uh, we are going to go through them. I've separated them into 4 different tiers. That's how I've done this ranking. We'll break them down a little bit, uh, why they're in their tiers. But remember, if before we get too far into it, uh, if you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. It will Your message with that tip or donation will pop up on the bottom of the screen. We'll have a little discussion about what you have to say. It'll pop up for me, for you, for everyone that is tuning in all around the world. We'll have a little talk about what you had to say. Your opinion will be heard. We appreciate anything you do give. Again, that link to go tip and donate is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, in our second segment here, we are going to be doing some quarterback prospect rankings. So obviously the NFL draft just about a month away, and the big storyline, like always, is the quarterbacks. There always are these debates: what quarterback's better? Because quarterback is the most important position on the field. So we are going to go through my Friday, March 8th rankings. These are subject to change as more information comes out, but pretty much set in stone at this point. It's going to be tough to change too drastically. And we'll start at the top. Like I was saying, I've got 4 different tiers. I've got the elite prospect tier, I've got the great prospect tier, the good prospect tier, and then the I guess tier. That's how I've split it up. And we're going to start at the top. The top with the elite prospect here. That is going to be Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams has been touted as one of the best prospects of all time. I don't quite think he's that level. I do think that he has some very special talents that make him elite. And when I'm talking about elite, the way that I define this, and the way that when I'm talking about discussions, because it's tough sometimes to differentiate between elite and great, right? When I'm talking about elite, I like to look at if they have something that they're the best at. Like if you can boil them down to one thing, this is the best at this, or something that makes them special. For instance, Lamar Jackson is an elite quarterback. What makes him that elite quarterback is his threat with the legs. Or Josh Allen is an elite quarterback. What makes him an elite quarterback is his arm talent, so on and so forth. That's my general definition here. And when we're talking about elite, there's only one player in this draft that has any of those elite talents, and that is Caleb Williams. His ability to extend plays and keep his eye control the ball downfield. Uh, his arm talent is incredible, but his elite talent is extending the play. He is the only quarterback that I believe in this draft class has elite potential. The potential is a very dangerous word when you're doing sports analysis, but at this point, that's all we have to go off of. So Caleb Williams is alone in my elite tier at the top. He's my QB1 off the board. He should go 101 regardless of who has that pick. Then we get into the other tier. This is the great tier, and here's where I may lose some people. I've got, again, this is a solo tier. Like I said, I've only done 7 quarterbacks. So tier 2, the great tier, I'm going with Jaden Daniels. Much like Lamar Jackson, what he can do, or Justin Fields, what he can do with his legs, he has the ability right away to be a huge playmaker in the NFL because of what he can do with his legs. He's an explosive play guy. The big question with him is, can he avoid taking those huge hits? If you go back and watch his tape, he took so many hits. This isn't like, oh, quarterbacks shouldn't run, they'll take too many hits type thing. This is the seismic hits that he was taking. It's incredible. He's getting like knocked off of his feet at least once a game, sometimes multiple times a game. He is not scared. He's not sliding. He's not scared to take those hits. He invites contact, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's one thing that makes him one of the best quarterbacks in this class. That's what led him to winning the Heisman: the ability to not be scared of those hits, just to take them. Uh, but when you get to the NFL, you don't want to be taking all those hits. You don't necessarily want to be doing it in college either. But Jaden Daniels is my QB2. He's sitting there. His passing, while it is incredible, he has great arm strength. I think I saw that he no, that was he's great arm strength. It's just the accuracy is not exactly where I want it to be. He's he's very good. He's my QB2 off the board. He does everything great. He's in my great tier. And this is where we start to get into the good tier. These are guys that I think will pan out, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. Um, Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, I expect to pan out. I expect them both to go in the first round, and I expect them both to go probably top five, and both of them to be great starting quarterbacks in the NFL. This is when we get to the good tier, and this has Michael Penix and Drake May. No particular order, although I think I personally would put Michael Penix above Drake May. Uh, so these two are kind of three A, 3B for me. And I know there was a lot of hype around Drake May heading into the draft. He Both of these guys are very good. Both of these guys, I wouldn't be surprised if they made it in the NFL. But neither of them really have that wow factor that sticks out to me in their game. Drake May is his arm talent is his biggest strength, and the way that he can read the field and dissect defenses. And that's super important in the NFL. He makes quick decisions, he is decisive. That is huge. But you can say the same thing about Michael Penix. Now, the big knock on Michael Penix is he has injury questions. Not that I think that's too big of a deal, and his arm strength was questioned. But if you watched him, it wasn't that big of a deal. He was able to make all these throws. His accuracy is incredible. I'm a big fan of Michael Penix. I will have him rated slightly higher than Drake May, but like I said, they are in the same tier here. These are guys that I expect to go. I expect Michael Penix to go in like the second round ish, somewhere around there, day two pick. Drake May probably will go in the top five, but I think those two guys are a similar level of success in the NFL. Again, situation. All of this affects where you go. Who you're playing for affects a lot of your success as well. But in my good tier here, I've got Michael Penix and Drake May, my quarterback 3 and 4 in this class. And this is where we get to the murky territory, the murky waters. I've got 3 quarterbacks here in my category. And I'm starting it off with Bo Nix. Bo Nix is coming off an incredible season. He is a veteran quarterback. He has played more games in college than any other player all time. Started more. He has plenty of tape on him. You know what he is. He is a backup quarterback at best. He's not going to be a starter that blows your socks off. We've seen what he did at Auburn. It wasn't all that impressive. He led Oregon to a great season, and he put up great numbers. He made improvements last season, but it wasn't. It hasn't faded from my mind what he was. And it's not like it was that huge of improvements that it's like, oh, you can forget about that. There's plenty of tape out on the guy. He's a little older, and I just don't think he quite is that NFL caliber player. I do expect him to go day 3. and I think he'll be a really nice backup for a team, a really good security blanket. But as far as him being a starter in the NFL, I don't quite see it for Bo Nix. My QB6 is JJ McCarthy. And JJ McCarthy is expected to go in that first round. I've talked ad nauseum about him. You can go back and take a look. I'm not a fan of JJ McCarthy. I think he is coasting off of the success of the team. He only had one game where he threw for 300 yards, and it was against not a great team. I forget exactly which one, but that schedule that Michigan played last season wasn't really that inspiring either. And you can point to play calling. They ran the ball a lot, I guess, but then how are you projecting him to be the number one overall pick if I can't tell you that he didn't put up numbers because he didn't perform? His accuracy numbers were not the greatest. Like, he was hovering around 50%. That's not where you want to be in the NFL. Uh, he was on a really good team, and he's a winner, and that's something that's important. That's something that you have to be able to do. Um, and he gets points for that, absolutely. That's why he's not the last quarterback on my board. But like Bo Nix, I don't see him as any more than a backup. I think he might be a high upside backup, a guy that might come in for a couple games and have his backup quarterback moment. Every single quarterback is going to have his backup quarterback moment. Uh, but it's one of those things that I am just not a big fan of him. He doesn't do anything to inspire me. I don't think he should be drafted any higher than day 3. The highest draft pick I would spend on him is a 5th round pick. I probably wouldn't even spend a draft pick on him, but he's projected to go in the first round. So there's a bunch of places he could go. Uh, so keep an eye out for him. And my final quarterback in the rankings here is going to be Spencer Rattler. He was a really high rated prospect heading into the NFL season, into his college career. He was starting over Caleb Williams at Oklahoma a couple seasons ago. He got benched and transferred to South Carolina, where he has engineered a couple wins, a couple big upset wins. But as far as him being an NFL quarterback, I just don't quite see it. He has potential and he has flashes, but he's not consistent enough. So he's down there in my tier. I probably wouldn't draft him. Uh, I don't know where he's projected to go. Day 3 at the highest. I think he'll probably go undrafted. But he's a name that carries some weight because of how highly touted he was as a prospect heading into college. Uh, so, again, I've broken up into 4 tiers. We got the elite tier consisting of Caleb Williams, the great tier consisting of Jaden Daniels, the good tier with Michael Penix and Drake May, and then the tier with Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, and Spencer Rattler. Uh, Let me know what you guys think of this ranking. I know my thoughts on JJ McCarthy are kind of controversial. I'd love to hear where you guys have him ranked, along with any other things you have to say about my list here. Leave those in the comments. I will check them out. But in our next segment, we are going to transition into a little fighting news, a little bit of entertainment news. Jake Paul and Mike Tyson are set to square off in July. So we are going to break that down a little bit, talk about some history behind that fight, and my thoughts on it as well. Stick around. We'll be right back on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in, we've done a bunch of rankings so far. In the first segment, we talked about some NBA player rankings. We went through our top 10, talked about Jason Tatum, talked about whether or not he is in the top 5 of NBA players today, currently. And we just finished going over some NFL quarterback prospect rankings, where I had them separated into 4 tiers. Go check that out if you missed it. In this segment, we are going to transition out of rankings, and we're going to transition into some boxing news, some entertainment world news. Jake Paul and Mike Tyson have agreed to a match. The contract is signed. We're going to break that down in just a second. But before we get too far into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcastnetwork.net. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. You can leave a tip or donation there. It'll give you an option to leave a message. It'll pop up on the bottom of the screen here for you, me, everyone else watching this to see. We'll have a little discussion about what you had to say, and contributes to the show and to me personally, so I appreciate that. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, we are going to move into some fighting news. Jake Paul and Mike Tyson are set to square off. They are going to play, they're going to fight each other in July. It's going to be a boxing match. And this is, I guess, interesting. You know, Jake Paul, kind of a controversial figure, not just in the sports, not just in the sports world, but in the entertainment world as well. Him and his brother Logan, anything they do kind of turns to gold. They are media darlings, kind of. I guess that's one way to put it, but they know how to make money. And this fight seems just like a great way for Mike Tyson to make a little more cash. He is 57 years old. Jake Paul is 27 years old. It's not necessarily fighting Mike Tyson in his prime. And that's been a big complaint with Jake Paul, who he's decided to fight in his professional boxing career. He's 9-1 in his professional career, and I went through every single fight he's had, professional and amateur. He's 10-1 if you include amateurs. And when I went through and I looked at who he fight. He looked at who he fought. So we'll start at the top. We're gonna run through this list here. Again, he's won a vast majority of his fights, and he's continued to get a lot better. He's been doing this for like 8 years at this point, and you can see the improvement, not just in how he's fighting, but who he's fighting as well. So we'll start at the top. He started off his career amateur match fighting Deji, a YouTuber. So that's check 1 out of 11 for not a real fight. His second fight was also against a YouTuber, someone named Ann Insab Gibb. 2 not real fights. His next fight came against Nate Robinson, the basketball player. So again, still not a real fight. That's 0 for 3. His next fight came against Ben Askren, who, to be fair, had a oh my goodness, is it still not working? I apologize. Who to be fair, was an MMA fighter, one that won a whole bunch, but he I don't know why it's not popping up. But he was retired at the time, and he was more known for grappling than he was known for boxing. So he gets kind of a half check mark there. His next 2 fights came against Tyron Woodley, again, retired MMA fighter who was more known for his ground game. He was a wrestler. So he's still in that tier where he's at least fighting people that fight now, but not quite a boxer. Then he fights his final fight against this kind of tier of people, or I won't say his final one, but his next one was against Anderson Silva, who is a legend in the fighting game, but he also is not a boxer. He's more of a kickboxer. He uses his legs. He wasn't as big into boxing as in that sport. Uh, Anderson Silva, who was also 47 at the time, so again, a retired older legend, kind of like what he's doing with Mike Tyson right now. And then he finally fights his first real boxer, Tommy Fury, who is a boxer, not a great boxer, but a boxer, and he takes his first loss. It was by split decision, uh, but he did fight a boxer finally. Coming off that loss, he goes back to that retired fighting person who doesn't have whose strength isn't boxing. He goes and fights Nate Diaz, who's a retired UFC champion, whose strength is on the ground game. Now he could box a little bit, so the competition continues to get better, but it's still not a real boxer. And finally now we hit where he starts to fight boxers. These aren't world class boxers, but at least he starts to fight them. His final three fights have all been against boxers. Andre August, who I was looking this up, he's ranked 299th in the world. Uh, he is a boxer. He's an active boxer, not a great one, but a boxer, and that's an improvement. Again, his next fight against Ryan Borland, the same situation. He's ranked number 340 in the world, a boxer, an active boxer, not someone who's retired, way past their prime, someone that is doing this for a living. That's two in a row he wins, and then he's supposed to fight Tommy Fury again, who ends up backing out. So he fights Hasim Rahman Jr., who is a boxer. It says he's retired right now, but I don't think he was retired at the time of the fight. So that's three in a row. He's making improvements, and a lot of the criticism against him, and the criticism that continues to come in now that he is fighting Mike Tyson, again, a 57-year-old Mike Tyson, is that he hasn't fought a real boxing match yet. And to a certain extent, that's true, but it's really the ones that are less publicized that are real boxing events. His last three were stuff that I personally had not heard of, and usually when he puts on an event, it is a much more it's an event, you know, uh, and all those last three were boxers. So hats off to him. He has been facing better competition, but the issue is when he goes and he does these kind of, I don't want to say joke fights because they are fighting, but when he goes and he does these not super serious ones. You know, he claims that he wants to be taken seriously as a real boxer, and he's taken steps to do that. I feel like the world has been a lot more accepting of him and his brother as athletes as opposed to YouTubers. His brother is doing wrestling now. But he's kind of inviting back in that same old criticism by fighting a 60-year-old Mike Tyson. You go and you say, hey, he's going to go and you say, hey, I'm a real boxer. I beat Mike Tyson. But there's a caveat there that he beat him with a 40-year age difference or a 30-year age difference. It's not, and I'm sure this is kind of a bucket list for him. I don't think this is like trying to prove a point. I think he just kind of wanted to fight Mike Tyson. I'm sure he grew up like, oh my God, Mike Tyson is the boxer. And now he gets the chance to fight him. I'm sure that's just something that he's dreamed of doing. But the criticism is still there. If he wants to be taken seriously as a boxer, he needs to continue to schedule like he's been doing recently. And I give him all the credit for actually doing that. He has truly become an athlete. He's starting to join up in those ranks, and he's pretty good at it. He might not be fighting the best competition, but even those MMA guys and the UFC guys that he has fought, they're still fighters. At the end of the day, they could still take out the normal person pretty handily, even if it was a boxing match. So he's pretty good at this. So I'd like to give him his flowers there, but it's an interesting situation. I'd love to know your thoughts. I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm excited for it. It's it's a gimmick fight, I would say, uh, but it's going to make a lot of money. Mike Tyson is a big name draw. Jake Paul is a big name draw. Um, I expect Jake Paul's going to win this fight. It's tough to be an elite boxer when you're 60 years old. Mike Tyson just is a little too old to be back in the ring. They're trotting out old legends again. It'll be interesting to say the least. But I don't think it's going to be. I do think Jake Paul will end up winning this fight. Mike Tyson, I don't know how long he's going to be able to stay in the ring. Again, he probably could do it. He is one of the greatest boxers of all time. Great power puncher. He gets one good hit in that could do it. I don't know what exactly his training regimen has been of late. I don't know exactly how if he's been preparing for this. I doubt Mike Tyson has, but it should be entertaining. And if there's one thing that the Paul brothers can do, it's entertain, and that's why they make such big headlines with everything they do. So I'm excited to see how this turns out. They are fighting in July, uh, but I'm curious. What do you think about this fight? Does this how does this reflect on Jake Paul or even Mike Tyson? How does this reflect on him? Because this might just be a money grab for him. You saw Mayweather fight, I believe, Logan Paul, kind of for a money grab and an amateur thing. And this could be a very similar situation. But I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on this. In our next segment, we are going to be moving into NHL coverage. The trade deadline ended at 3 o'clock today, so all the trades are final. Rosters are finalized for the playoffs. People made pushes. Some big surprising trades were made. We're going to go over all the big ones and their implications, not just for this year, but for years further down the line. Stick around on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that third and final break. If you were just tuning in, we just finished talking about the Jake Paul fight coming up against Mike Tyson and some implications of that. In our first two segments, we did some rankings. The first segment, we talked about NBA player rankings. We did a top 10 with some honorable mentions. And in our second segment, we talked about the NFL quarterback prospect rankings. Talked a little bit about the different tiers they were in. Go check that out. It was good stuff. In this fourth and final segment of our show today, we are going to be reviewing the entire NHL trade deadline. The trade deadline ended at 3 p.m. today. We're gonna go over every major move that happened. We can't go over every single move. There were actually a lot of super small moves we'll get to if we need to, but there were plenty of massive moves that happened this trade deadline as well. It was a very active trade deadline. But before we get too far into it, remember that if you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. It should pop up on the bottom of the screen, your message right there We'll have a little discussion about what you have to say for you, me, and everyone that is watching around the whole world to check out. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Uh, so, like I was saying, the NHL trade deadline ended today. So we are going to review the NHL trade deadline, talk about some of the massive moves, the big implications from some of these teams that has been going on. Uh, and we'll start off with the Capitals. We'll say that the Capitals and the Penguins, both of those two were the big sellers of the deadline. Both of those two had the faces of the league in Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin, and they're both struggling to compete with their declining stars. A lot of their guys are retiring. Their old cores are retiring, or they're leaving, or they're just not as good as they used to be. So they are starting to build up assets so that they can compete again sooner rather than later. And the Capitals made a couple moves, none as big as trading star of the 2019 postseason run, Evgeny Kuznetsov. Evgeny Kuznetsov, who really slayed the demon that was the Penguins for the Capitals. He was the one that scored that overtime goal to advance them to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that was the most important moment in Caps history, to be honest with you. So he is a Capitals legend. He's been kind of on the decline as of late. Uh, he hasn't really been the same since 2019. He's been going through some issues off the ice with some drug addiction stuff. But he was traded to the Hurricanes for a 2025 third. Uh, Again, he's going to add. He still has that skill. When you watch him, he's a very skillful player. His offense isn't quite the same. He's not doing the same production, but he's going to be a good second or third line center for the Canes as they try to make another deep playoff run. He has that playoff experience, which is always super important, and he has the ability to go into that high gear. There'll be stretches where he has these. He kind of travels back in time to his elite self again. It doesn't happen all that often, but he does have the ability to do that. The next big trade, uh, continuing with the Penguins, they traded Jake Gensel to, again, the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes, who were probably the winners of the deadline. They got two really nice pieces there in, Jake Gensel and getting Kuznetsov. Either them or the Vegas Golden Knights, who we'll talk about in a second, were probably the winners of the deadline. He went to the Canes. They gave up three prospects, a player, and a conditional first. Could turn into a second, depending on how they do in the playoffs. Jake Gensel right now is a point per game player. Uh, he has 52 points in 50 games. There are concerns of how he'll perform when he's not on the same line with Sidney Crosby. But when you can get a point per game player without giving up a first, it's still a pretty hefty haul. It's not like as big as a lot of people expected it to be. But being able to bring in Jake Gensel to, again, depth scoring, depth scoring, depth scoring, he is going to slot in to that first or second line. He's going to be a top six forward for them. He's the best forward available, most likely, or theorized to be available at this deadline, and the Canes went out and they got him. So good on them. I think the Canes had an incredible deadline. The other team, the Vegas Golden Knights, that might be in contention for the best deadline, or the Jets. All three of those teams had really good deadlines. The Vegas Golden Knights traded for Thomas Hertl from the Sharks. They gave up their 2023 first round pick, another first, and two thirds. So it was a big price to pay, but Thomas Hertl is going to be incredible for them. The Knights, who are defending the Cup, they also added some depth scoring with Anthony Mantha. Thomas Hertl is going to slide into the top six. He's probably going to go on that first line, most likely. Maybe second line, depending on how they want to do their lineups, if they want to keep it the same. But they geared up. They got a lot of scoring. That was what they were missing. They have Aiden Hill back there in goal, who was incredible during that Cup run. He hasn't been quite as good, but they have the goalie position locked up. The defense has been solid. And again, they're a very good team in the league, so the offense hasn't been bad either. But they really geared up trying to make another cup run. And then the Jets, they got Tyler Toffoli and Sean Monahan. Tyler Toffoli is going to be, again, depth scoring. He's on pace for 30 goals. He's on the Devils. The Jets gave up a second and third round pick for him. He's on pace for 30 goals for the second year in a row. He's going to most likely surpass 50 points for the second time in his career. And the Jets, who have the Vezina leading goalie right now, in Connor Hellebuck, are trying to capitalize on it. The Jets are a team that were really good a couple years ago, kind of took a deep dive off of a cliff and have come all the way back. They're in a very interesting position, where you don't quite want to where they don't quite want to give up. They were kind of borderline last season, and now they're contending. It's a very interesting spot to be in. But you add Sean Monahan, who is from the Canadians, who's having an incredible year. He's going to add offense. That's always been their biggest weakness. Uh, you have a Vezina caliber, Vezina winning goalie, Vezina leading goalie in Hellebuck, and goalies are the most important thing in hockey. So they are in a very good spot right now. And Tyler Toffoli is going to slide into that bottom six. He's going to be, again, depth scoring. He's going to be really important for them in the playoffs, keeping their hopes alive for a cup. And then some other major moves, and this was the most confusing one to me. We just talked about the Devils trading Tyler Toffoli away. They fired their head coach just a couple days ago, and at the last moment, they traded for Jake Allen from the Canadiens, a goalie. The goalie position has been the biggest issue for the Devils all season. There's been a lot of issues with them, injuries. Defense took a step back. Offense took a step back. Again, injuries have been a big thing, but goaltending took a leap back. And they were theorized to go get a goalie at the deadline, but then they traded away a couple pieces, Tyler Toffoli included, and it seemed like they were sellers. But then they go out and they get a goalie. It's only for a conditional third. Jake Allen isn't like one of those elite goalies, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me for the Devils to go trade for a goalie after they have traded away a bunch of pieces. The Devils want to be a competing team, or seem like they want to be a competing team, but they can't quite figure out what direction they want to go in. I know they traded away expiring contracts, so it's going to be an interesting thing to see. But yeah, and going back to the Knights, they also added excuse me, also added Noah Hannafin, the defenseman from the Flames, who is having an incredible year. They made a lot of big swings at the deadline. They gave up a first and a third, and the Flyers got a fifth in that trade as well as taking some salary. The Knights really did a lot at this deadline. It's going to be interesting to see how that West plays out. I think there's a really good shot of them repeating, or at least winning the West. As far as winning the Cup again, it's going to be tough. It's really tough to win two in a row in any sport, hockey especially, just because of how long and how physical of a season it is. A couple other massive trades that we are going to cover before the show ends. Elias Lindholm from the Flames to the Canucks. They gave up 3 players, a first and a fourth. Elias Lindholm was their first line center. He goes to the Canucks, a team that finally broke out after so long of just being on the cusp of it. The Canucks did this season. They are competing for the President's Trophy, which is the best record in the league. And adding a guy like Elias Lindholm to the roster is something that could push them over the top. And last but not least, Chris Tanev. Again, the Flames were very active. They're selling everyone. They traded him to the Stars. The Stars got him, Cole Brady. The Flames got a second and a third, and the Devils were a part of this trade. They got a fourth. The Devils were a part of it to make the money work. Um, but Chris Tanev is going to again add depth. Depth, depth, depth. It's all about depth. The Stars have an elite goalie in Jake Ottinger, and their top line is one of the best and most formidable top lines in all of hockey. They are very, very good at hockey. Uh, I'm very excited to see how the playoffs play out. I think it's either the Canes or the Knights that won the deadline. I'm leaning towards the Golden Knights, just because they got three huge players, and they honestly didn't have to give up too much to get them. They gave up a lot, but they didn't have to give up as a king's ransom to get any of these guys. And this can help. Then they're trying to repeat. Vegas has been very aggressive in ownership basically the entire time that they've been a franchise. So they made it to the Cup the first year of their existence, and they've just been going gung ho the entire time. They've just been competing, 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 and that's something that I really appreciate about that front office, that organization. But let me know what you guys think of the trade deadline. It was a really busy trade deadline for something that seemed like it was going to be really quiet. There were actually a lot of huge names that ended up getting traded. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. I hope you all have an amazing weekend. We will be back on Monday, same time, same place. We appreciate you for tuning in. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.